Well, good afternoon, warriors. Welcome to Warrior Urban Talk Radio podcast. It's your girl, Carly Ree, bringing you the hottest interviews and 10-minute tips from warrior parents, students, leaders, and experts in SPEDucation and gifted in urban school communities. If you haven't already, go on ahead and subscribe to the Warrior Agency LLC YouTube channel for all the latest videos. Today, our topic is Untold Stories of Black Boys with Special Needs. Our special guests today are Miles and his mom, Mrs. Mixon. Just a quick backstory. I was actually Miles's middle school center program teacher way back in the day. And, I've kept up with the family throughout the years. I was actually at Miles's high school graduation, and I attended his graduation party as well. So we've been keeping up throughout the years. So his mom was actually at my wedding as well. So, and today I'm celebrating 19 months. So, I'm really happy for that. So, thank you all so much for being here today. So, how are you? Tell us a little bit about what's been going on and how you all are doing.
Well, we're doing well. We're blessed every day. But I would like to start the story off with Miles attending elementary school. Um Miles was in a sped class, and I just struggled. And the thing about it is, not only was I struggling, the school was struggling because this was their first special education class. So Miles was a first grader in a fourth and fifth grade class. And even though his disability was the same as other schools, was the same as other students, um, the social aspect was far different because Miles was so much younger.
Can you
And
tell us what is Miles's disability and when was he actually put on an IEP?
his disability was cognitive, learning, and ADD.
Hmm. Hmm. And what was your initial reaction to that? I know when my son, who is autistic, was put on an IEP initially, even though I was a sped educator and all that, it still was like really hard for me to, um, it was really hard for me to accept at first. And I just don't know why. So I would be interested in knowing like what was your initial reaction when Miles was put on IEP?
Well, Miles has a cousin that they're maybe 10 months apart. And the development, I'm an older mother. I'm an older mother. So I read a lot of books. I wasn't around a whole bunch of kids because I was living my life. And reading the books that I've read um, on development, the first year of development for your child, uh, Miles was kind of lacking as he grew older. The older he got, the more he didn't keep up with where he should have been. So I talked to his doctor about it, and his father said, well, everybody learns differently. And I said, I get that, but there are certain levels where you should be walking, talking, you know, and that came a lot slower for Miles. So I contacted And at first I thought he was deaf, but he was just ignoring us. And I took him for a hearing test, and they would show a puppet when he make a noise, and then he would look for the puppet. And
Mhm.
so I said, okay, so he's been ignoring us. Um, and then I contacted a neurologist, and they did some tests, and they told me that Miles wouldn't be a functioning part of society from the tests that they took. But I'm not going to listen to any human being because God has something planned for me and my family. And I moved on. I didn't give up. I treat Miles like I treat anyone else. And I think that's what has made his development as a young man what it is today.
Wow. Well, as a
And
Black student with special needs, tell us some of the challenges that both you, Miles, and Mrs. Mixon, what are some of the challenges that you all have faced through the journey?
well, I've been pretty lucky because all of his teachers from day one has been very supportive, and we've exchanged different information, and you have to be proactive. And just because there are educators out there, that doesn't mean that they know as well. So
Mhm.
that's why you have to, well, did you know this? Did you know that? Um, but the most important part of this journey was an IEP and getting him the right educational material to move forward in his as a student.
Mhm. What about daycare? Because right now my son won't be able to, like, well, he's in fifth grade now, so with his autism he still needs that like supervision after school and all of that. And I remember when he was younger he was actually like kicked out of four daycares, and it was just because, you know, when his disability manifested itself they didn't have that level of support. So what type of support were you given, like with daycare and all of that?
Well, I've been pretty lucky in that respect as well. Miles had supervised daycare till he was 12.
Mm.
And then his father was ill, and he moved back into my home. And so while while Miles's father was there, um, I taught Miles to uh, and me and his father reinforced him setting his alarm clock, getting up on his own, and his father had to walk him to the front door so the bus driver could see him and wave and say, somebody's here,
Mhm.
coming and going. So um, basically, it was a training type thing. And then the daycare support that we had was a family member who was a licensed daycare provider. So she made Miles be accountable like the other kids.
Mhm.
She didn't freak out if he had a meltdown. Um, and she was a very patient person.
Yeah. Is that like, is with just being patient and leading with love, would you say that those are things that um that families should look for when they're looking for a provider?
They need the educational background to know what they're dealing with. Um, because sometimes love can erode when you're dealing with a situation that uh, the provider is not used to.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I made a list of things that um, I had experience with Miles. I mean, like um, he was with an organization pre kindergarten, and Miles would eat and it would fall out of his mouth. So he would hold his head back, which could cause a choking issue.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, how can we stop this? So we would take a bite and we would just hum a song. And so when he went to school and he was humming, the educator said, "We don't allow that. You don't do that." And she was an older lady and she thought that he was playing. And I had to sit her down and say, "Look, this is what's been going on. He lost 5 pounds because he wasn't eating, and it wasn't appropriate for him to hold his head back to swallow. So we go through this process so he can keep his mouth closed and chew at the same time while he hums." So
Mhm.
it's having a sped kid, you have to be creative and some of the things that fit their disabilities to make things work.
Yeah,
And you
I hear
have to
you.
and you have to make a list and you have to, put that on a list and let the teacher or the provider be aware of what this kid does and what a kid will do and how they function and how they might function in a classroom setting. So there won't be any surprises, and so they can be ready to adapt to the situation.
I definitely hear that. Well, who has been your biggest support system through it all?
His teachers, his
Mm-hmm.
teachers, uh, Miss Arell, it's only by God's grace that for the most part I've had wonderful educators to educate me and to educate Miles and put us on the right path as far as what he needed to do, what was his weak points, and how. I mean, we worked through a variety of different techniques to teach him how to read, to do math, and uh, and that's why he's so brilliant today. It's a collaborative effort with um, the educators, with the parent, and with family.
Mm. Well, Miles, what was it like for you in spite of all the challenges that your mom has just shared with us, finally making it to graduation day? What did that feel like for you?
It it felt pretty good, honestly. Of course, I did have some tough times and everything. I was going through some situations, and I was able to like still push through and punch my ticket into graduation. I wasn't going to like let certain things get get in my way. So I just kind of like put in the effort of making sure I graduate. And of course, I had some support with that,
Mhm.
and I'm thankful for that.
Wow. I mean, I was at graduation day, and when I tell you I was in tears the entire time, and they were just like tears of joy because I've seen the journey through middle school and just getting to that point of graduation and you work so hard and everything that you and your mom have experienced. It was a beautiful celebration, and I'm so thankful that I was there. I was able to be there with you all. Um, well, like I said, we worked together through a lot in middle school. So tell
Well,
us.
and I I would like to say, Ms. Terrell, um, I was so, uh, I've taken a lot of classes. Um, I have a story. There was a young man and he had cerebral palsy, and Miles was in the first grade. And he watched me and he watched me and he said, "Excuse me, miss." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Why do you do everything for that kid?" And I said, "Because that's my child." And he said, "You know, I have my PhD in psychology." And I said, "All right, well, congratulations." And he said, "If you do everything for your child, they won't know how to navigate through life. What is he going to do when you're gone?"
Yeah.
And I got emotional. It was truly heartfelt.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, I prayed about it, I thought about it, and a lot of people thought I was too hard on Miles. You know, he would want to give up, and he would say, "People tease me because I'm in a special education program." And I said, "You know what? This is how this works. Everybody learns differently. And the reason why that kid is teasing you about being in that program is because he's jealous of the support that you get
Mm-hmm.
online. Because somewhere in his education history, he's not being supported. And you're being loved by your teachers and your family and the administration of the school that you're in. Because I am there all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And with all that love and support, um, we would like to know, like, where are you right now? Because I know graduation happened maybe a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So what's going on with Miles right now? What's the update?
Well, I'm working now. I work at UC Health Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm with EBS. Uh, I work. So what I do. So what I do there is that. So what I do. So what I do there is that I do a little cleaning there here and there, and I talk to a lot of people.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
there's a lot of nice people there.
Okay, my turn. um, First of all, in graduation, Miles was one of the top 10 students in his class
Mm-hmm.
because he was speaking conversational Spanish for the last 2 years. I thought he was throwing out phrases,
Wow.
and so when you said you were in tears, my blouse was totally wet because I was like, "Why is he sitting up on the stage? We need a program so we can see what's going on." And that's what was going on. And I guess I just wasn't paying attention. I should have. And that was absolutely amazing. But most of Miles's friends were from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So he was teaching them English and they were teaching him Spanish. Sometimes the Spanish wasn't so good because there was some cuss words in there from time to time.
Oh no.
But we straightened that out. After Miles's graduation, well, before Miles's graduation, there was a lot of work that for the second semester that we had to take care of, like the transition program, and transition from high school
Mhm.
to young adulthood and the workforce.
Right.
And so he had an amazing um, manager through the transition program, and Miles had went to a school where he decided he was going to do culinary, which was worked out well for me because, excuse me, he can cook pretty good.
Okay, so what is he what you whipping up in the kitchen, Miles? You making
Uh,
that chicken Alfredo?
pork chop casserole, tater tot casserole, tuna fish casserole.
Spaghetti is amazing.
Yes, and spaghetti. Spaghetti is one of my favorites.
Okay, so I'm gonna need, okay, so after this, I'm gonna need a little sample. That's just a little side note. I just need a little sample of the spaghetti and whatnot. So just keep that in mind, okay?
That pork chop casserole is the bomb.
What? I need a sample. Seriously.
It is the bomb. We'll have to have you over for dinner so you can try it out.
Yes, yes. I need my invite, please. We will do a social distance tasting because I need I need to be a part of that for real. But speaking of transition, um, what would you advise for families? What should they be doing right now in order to prepare their children with special needs for independent living and adulthood?
Well, first of all, it starts from the very beginning, like the IEP throughout his educational career, so they can decide what you're going to need uh, to be successful on their own or as they mature as an adult. Will they always need assistance? In a lot of cases, yes. Um, the IEP will be a gauge for Rocky Mountain Human Services, DBR, to the capability of the young adult.
Mhm.
Can they work as in a culinary situation, or would a knife be too dangerous?
Mhm.
Um, can they type or or run errands within the environment that they're in to make money to help support themselves? And the IEP is good for benefits through, like Rocky Mountain Human Services, an organization, a wonderful organization that helps people with disabilities be as functional in society as possible.
Mhm.
They, if your goal is to live out on your own, but you can't balance out a checkbook, they will set up uh, SLS to support that uh, young adult, to have an organization come in and take them grocery shopping, help budget um, their checkbook. And that being said, along with that, there's a guardian that's needed, someone that has contact. The guardian will make sure he never falls through the cracks. So every year, you have to fill out an application. Are you still living in the same place? Is the client still living in the same place, or the young adult? Um, um, how often do you have interaction? Where are they working? And who's involved in their life?
Mhm.
Follow through with that. as a possibility there might be a warrant for my arrest because they take these things very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a good thing. So if something were to happen to me, the next person on the list would be his father.
Mm-hmm.
And his father doesn't have to necessarily be the guardian. Someone else in the family can be a guardian that has the time to put in the work. Also, I have established a team of 10 people. Um, Out of the 10 people, I have my sister, which is an accountant,
Mm-hmm.
a very good friend that is a care provider, um, my cousin that will assist in making sure that everybody's on board with what goes on in his life, and these are the old folk. The
Mm-hmm.
younger folk are my best friend's daughter, who just got her master's degree in special education, and she's a
Yeah.
year older than Miles.
Another special educator on the team.
Amazing young woman.
Mm-hmm.
His cousin is 25, and she is a resident at Children's Hospital and at University
Wow.
Hospital. So um, um, there are a little bit older cousins that are like in their 40s because Miles is the only male on his father's side of the family
Mm-hmm.
and the only one that would carry the name. And he's the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
So his cousins are considerably older, like in their 30s and 40s.
20s.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so they can kind of keep up with family stuff and making sure in the guardianship is that if Miles had a medical emergency, they since he has a cognitive disability, he would have support from me or whoever the guardian is to make sure he makes the proper choice and that the medical institution won't decide for him.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not be in his best interest.
Right.
And the same with the legal aspect. If he were to get arrested for some odd reason, I would be able to step in and find out and help him navigate with an attorney. And that being said, I think parents should always tell their, or family members should always tell their young adults with special needs, I want my attorney and I want my parent or my guardian, and leave it at that. Because even though police are supposed to be looking at our best interests, they don't have the education to deal with um, persons with disabilities, be it autism, be it cognitive, be it emotional. And
Mm-hmm.
that can go wrong in so many ways, especially for our Black and brown young adults.
Wow. That was powerful. I'm really glad that I'm really happy that you pointed that out because there have been so many incidences where things have gone wrong with law enforcement and persons with disabilities. So I'm glad that you touched on that. And is for as long as I've known you, you have been a very, very strong advocate for Miles. And I just wanted to get your advice for other families who may be experiencing like similar challenges I know that some families say that it's been really hard for them to be able to receive like Social Security for their young adult who's transitioning into being independent. So, what is your advice for families who may be experiencing similar challenges with their Black sons who have special needs?
Well, their disabilities most of the time is caught early in life. So you start out with your Security early. And if you haven't started out with your Social Security early, then you get a medical, you have to be, um, you have to let your family physician or their pediatrician know what is going on.
Mhm.
And so there's a record, and then you have to get an IEP, which is an educational evaluation program. So that will back it up through the school system, and that's very important. And that's very important for your physician because you can give that paperwork to the physician, and the physician can read the information and say, okay, so this is why this kid has this um, um, responds to me in this manner,
Mhm.
whatever the situation may be.
Mhm.
And so it's good for everybody involved to know what's going on. And then and your physician may have, well, like with ADD, I think this medication is too harsh and it may cause for young men growth in the breast tissue. So let's try this so it won't be so impactful on his body. Some of this medication might impact the liver, the kidneys, and you want to be very aware of that. And sometimes that medication is like a light switch. Use the medication, and it's like, this is a totally different kid. Take them off that medication, and it goes the opposite direction. But we have to have an even balance to make sure that his physical as well as their mental capacity is safe.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of research that is involved. And when I started out with Miles' educational career, I didn't know anything. I was stumbling, and there were some things that um, the educational institution that Miles was in didn't understand because that was their first SPED class that they ever had. So
Mhm.
they didn't, and then they had a brand new teacher,
Mhm.
uh, graduated from college and so forth. And so she didn't have a mentor to follow up with. Well, I'm having this problem. I have a kid in the first grade, and the rest of my students are fourth graders and fifth graders. And I'm having all kind of issues. And when you have issues like that, because I went to the administrative office for this and spoke to the school board about this situation, and it took me a year to navigate. And everything changed for the following year because I got a family law attorney and I got a psychologist and a psychiatrist to help say that even though they have the same disabilities in the class, socially this wasn't appropriate for Miles.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, it's only been by God's grace that I have been introduced to educators and other parents to steer me in the right direction because You know, when a child is in special education, the school cannot call and say, you need to come and get your kid, or we will call social services. That is against the law
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because you have to be able to support your family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there have been horrible situations where Miles said, I was handcuffed today, and he was in the first grade. He weighed, what, less than 50 pounds because he was pretty petite as a younger child. And when I went to his teacher said, by another student? I said, no, this wasn't in play. It was the security. And she lied to me.
Wow.
I went to the principal and I asked the same thing, and he lied to me. There was an incident where um, we had some family law stuff to deal with, and the court um, had did an investigation, and in the investigation we found out that he was handcuffed by security in the school.
Mm. Wow.
So, listen to that child's voice. Listen to that voice, because it is, and you have to follow through. It's work to have a child and to go through the system, but it's even more work when you have a SPED kid, because they're taken advantage of in so many ways and in so many areas of their life.
Mm. Wow. That was powerful. That really hit home for me because in my son's school district, we were in conflict. We were in a huge conflict, and I had to actually take his school district to court in order for him to be placed in an autism school. And thank God that the law was on my side through reading the procedural safeguards and all of that. So my son is currently in an autism school, and his school district is paying for that. So I really thank you for sharing that piece, because we do have to be aware of what's going on with our kids in school. Because even with me, doing this podcast and being a special educator and being a leader in urban school communities, sometimes even as a parent of a child with special needs, I still have to be even more aware of what's going on, because sometimes while there could be good intentions, it's not really good outcomes.
There's bad apples in every racial group, every um, professional group, police, teachers, doctors, and that's why it is so important to do your research.
Hmm.
Um, Everybody loves their children and they do the best that they can.
Hmm.
And I'm so glad you're doing this podcast, because every parent that I come across that has a SPED kid, I am giving them information, but it's up to them to follow through. And if they don't follow through, they'll find themselves in a situation where their kid is way too needy, or they won't have an outlet like parent to parent to interact with other parents, to get information, to get things for the kids. Like, say, if your kid couldn't speak, they had a problem with their vocal cords, there is a gadget that they can put through their throat. They can move their mouth, and the what they're trying to say will come out, and they will be more understood. And that's where the IEP comes in. Never take anything off of your IEP. Add to it, don't take it off, because sometimes there's some regression.
Hmm. Yeah, and speaking of that, looking back, do you have any regrets or things that you wish you would have done differently with Miles?
Um, Not really, because it was a learning process for me,
Hmm.
and I've been proactive. I met a young woman. Um, she's the director and probably the owner of the Thrive Center in Aurora. And she too has a child that, well, a son, and a young adult son that has, excuse me, a disability. Brilliant young man. When it comes to technology, he lays it out. And that being said, he's attending college in Vegas
Wow.
at the university there. And so there are dreams and aspirations that we have for our kids. Some are limited to their disability, and we know that this is as far as they're going to go. But we still celebrate it because some of the medical institutions or educational institutions didn't even think these children could go that far.
Hmm.
So we have to have hope, we have to steadfast and support and advocate and teach the kids, teach the young adults that can advocate for themselves, and even as children, advocate for themselves.
Hmm.
You have to learn to speak up for yourself, because there might not be someone there to speak up for you.
That is so true. I guess my final question is, what has Miles's disability meant to the both of you, and how are you looking to inspire and empower others?
Well, I agreed to be on this podcast because I think it's very important, because people of color sometimes don't get the same opportunities and materials to move forward for um, their young adults. Miles has participated in a program called Project Search, which train kids or train young adults to advocate for themselves on the job. And it's a limited program, and it has, you have to work for that. They interview you, and when you go for these interviews for programs such as Miles was in Project or a Search, um, you have to put your best foot forward. So you put on your best dress, your best suit, and as a parent, you prepare your kid and the questions that they might ask so they don't have to guess.
Hmm.
Put that information out there. And Miles is is doing well. A matter of fact, we had a major house fire. Our home was struck by lightning and caught on fire, and
Oh, wow.
missed 2 days out of a 2 year program. Just 2 days. I took all the money that I had and I got him slacks that they wore for the program, and the shirts that was similar to the program, and put him right back in it so he wouldn't miss a beat. And so while I was trying to figure out where we're going to go, we're homeless, even though I had insurance, you know, there is a couple of days where you're trying to figure things out and what the insurance company is going to do for you. And I relied too much on that because they don't take you by your hand and lead you where you need to go.
Mm-hmm. That is so
So
true.
life is a puzzle, and in situations dealing with persons with special needs, um, you just stumble through. There are some failures, but there are a lot of successes.
Wow. So, Miles, I'm going to shoot the same question to you. What is your disability meant to you, and how are you looking to empower and inspire others who are in the same, who have either a similar disability as you, or really need that motivation and encouragement?
Honestly, I really think that for people who may have the same disability as me or different from me should just like em, embrace it because it's a part of them. It's who they are, and for their parents, don't let anyone judge their child or them because that's just who they are. That's that's just what they have, and just embrace it because one of these days they will be successful. They will be successful, disability or not. They will be successful. So I would ignore all that BS, all that BS that you would hear from a doctor, chiropractor, or whatever. Just do you embrace it in your own way. Now, of course, everybody learns in a different way, but that's okay though. That's okay though, because as long as you're getting your education the way you would like to get it, the way you would normally get it, can't nobody tell you different. And then when those same people see you succeeding in life, all of a sudden they'll be all humble and mouth shut.
Wow.
Right on.
I mean, there's nothing else to say after that. That was powerful, Miles. Thank you so much for that advice and that encouragement. Um, so as we end, are there any final words, tips, or advice that you want to give to our families and people in urban school communities who work with our students with special needs?
Well, I think there are for for educators to go in the special education field. They're unique people with a lot of patience and a lot of challenges, and um, get these parents in there. Uh, some of these parents don't have the support, and so they push all of the issues that these kids have on the teachers. And it has to be a collaboration for these kids to be successful. And everybody has to follow through. Sometimes you have a teacher that won't follow through. So the parent has to clear that throat and make their voice heard on what this kid might need, and vice versa.
Hmm.
Um, it is not for the faint at heart by far. Um, And that's why there's group like Parent to Parent. The Thrive Center is was a major asset for me and Miles's life because this organization puts uh, several different groups together. If you need support as a parent, yeah, they give you that information. They have you come to a class, and for the kids that are really young, they have a daycare provider there. They play with the kids. And for the kids that are older, they ask these kids, what do they want out of life? What can they do to achieve better? Then they teach them how to advocate to support what you as a parent has instilled into them. And their voice is heard at the meeting as well by the parents. So if you didn't know a particular issue that your kid was going through, it is laid out to the world and yourself. So you have to follow through. Sometimes parents don't want to hear some of the things that their kids have to say. Um, and then when it's laid out there, it's made you accountable. So you have to act on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the Thrive Center, for those who need help or stumbling through their kids' education from, I'd say, um, from 3 to 21, they have information for you to help you navigate.
Mm. Well, shout out to those organizations who are helping our babies. I just want to conclude by saying thank you all so much for being here and for sharing your story with us. It's so important for our voices to be heard and for everyone to join the movement to support our children with special needs. So, again, thank you so much for coming out and sharing your story. Our You can check out our latest videos at the Word Agency LLC on our YouTube video. And sorry, on our YouTube channel. Thanks again, and we'll be talking to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Mr.